Day ceremony 2017 here on the Key Biscayne Green. Thank you. I want to especially thank the village staff today because yesterday when I came by, this was all still fenced off and there was a lot of other construction and other stuff around. So I really appreciate their hard work in getting this set up today for us to commemorate veterans far and wide today. We have a good slate this morning, and I'm proud to see as many people as there are. I wish we had a little bit more, but you know, next time we'll try to publish it a little bit better to make sure everybody remembers. Because this year, obviously, Veterans Day is really tomorrow, but it's being celebrated today on November 10th, which happens to be the 242nd year birthday of the Marine Corps. So, hurrah! Yep. So, without further ado, please rise for the posting of the colors. Out the colors! Over here. Up. Hey. Over. Up. Please remain standing for the singing of the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched, were so gallantly streamed, and the bombers to the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please remain standing for the saying of the Pledge of Allegiance by Coast Guard Cadet. There's Emilio. Oh, here you go, Emilio. Great. Very proud of our contingent of Coast Guard cadets from the Key Biscayne Mass Academy.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Now will Father Juan Carlos lead us in an invocation.
Almighty God, be with us as we come together today to pay tribute to those who have served and those who are serving in our armed forces. We are grateful for their dedication and commitment and the countless selfless acts they have performed and the sacrifices of their families, so that we might continue to enjoy freedom. We thank you for their service to our nation, and we thank you for their commitment and service to our families, to our communities. in society in the years since they have served. We are mindful of the fact that many of their friends sacrificed their very life on the fields of the seas and in the air, where the battles of the world have been fought. We remember those today with great reverence and thanksgiving. We thank you for our great men. We thank you for life. We thank you for liberty and the freedom for the pursuit of happiness that constitute the legacy of our founders and the ongoing ideals of our republic. Continue your blessings upon us as we conduct this ceremony, and may each of us, as individuals and as nation, continue to acknowledge you. Amen.
Amen.
Now for a special reading by Legionnaire Jewel.
Good morning. Thank you for attending. Veterans Day is a celebration that originated as Armistice Day in 1919 after World War I. Then Congress passed a resolution in 1926 making Armistice Day an annual observance. And in 1938, Veterans Day became a national holiday. I would like all the veterans in attendance and current service members to stand and be recognized for their selfless service to our nation. Please be seated. Thank you for your service. There are approximately 3 million members of the U.S. military composed of active, reserve, and National Guard forces, which is roughly 1% of the U.S. population. This 1% of our population has answered the call to military service and has sustained an unprecedented level of combat in the last 16 years. This is a huge burden on the shoulders of the few. Within the armed forces, there exists an elite group, the 1% of the 1%ers, who have volunteered to complete rigorous and physically demanding training in order to arrive at the cutting edge of battle by land, sea, or air. The select few to complete this intense training are the Special Operation Forces of the U.S. military. The Special Operation Forces have many names: Air Force Special Operation Aviators, Combat Controllers and Pararescue, Navy SEALs and Special Warfare Combat Crew members, Army Rangers and Special Forces Green Berets, and most recently, the Marine Corps Raiders. Although they serve in different branches of the military, the special operators all volunteer knowing the inherent high-risk hazards to their chosen profession and accept the fact that the country expects them to move further, faster, and fight harder than any other service member. In closing, I would like to recognize the special operation veterans in attendance that served as the tip of the spear of the U.S. military. Please stand if you served with a special operations unit during your career. Ladies and gentlemen, the 1% of the 1%ers. Please enjoy this national holiday, which celebrates the military service members who protect our freedom. Thank you.
Now I'll post historian, Legionnaire LaRuth.
Thank you. Coincidentally, I'm going to be telling you a story about a Special Forces person. Just pure coincidence. If I had to give a name to this talk, I guess I would call it "Who Took the Heroics Out of Heroes?" In thinking about this, I went to a dictionary to look up the meaning of some words. First, I looked up the meaning of hero in my dictionary. It says, in mythology, one who's endowed of great courage and strength, are noted for feats of nobility of purpose, especially one who has risked or sacrificed one's life. Also a person prominent by reason of special achievements or contributions. Then I went to look up the word debase. To lower in character, quality, or value. Degrade or adulterate. Last year for Veterans Day, I read a column, Miami Herald columnist Leonard Pitts, who bemoaned the debasement of the word hero. He noted that it seems even someone serving as a supply sergeant in South Carolina is deemed a hero these days. I'm reminded of the humorist Garrison Keillor, who created the imaginary town, Lake Wobegon, where all children were above average. The debasement of hero reached a new low, in my mind, recently with a Miami Herald article reporting on the birth of premature twins in South Miami. They were not only heroes, but they were superheroes. A few weeks earlier, this same paper and other media reported on the awarding of a Medal of Honor to Private Gary Michael Rose, a medic in Vietnam. I'd like to read from a Washington Post article titled, "An Army Medic Saved Dozens of Men in Vietnam War. Now he's been awarded the Medal of Honor." Dated 23 October of this year. In 1967, at the age of 19, Gary joined the U.S. Army and became a Special Forces combat medic. In his second combat mission, Rose set out on September 11, 1970, on a 4-day mission with American, Vietnamese, paramilitary Montagnard personnel into enemy-controlled territory in Laos for Operation Tailwind. The operation involved 136 men, 16 of whom were Americans, and 120 the Montagnard fighters. They were Vietnamese indigenous people. They were all inserted by helicopter. The group soon met enemy fire, leaving 2 Americans and 2 Montagnards wounded. Rose, who was the only medic among 136 men, rushed to rescue one of the wounded and carry him back to the company through heavy gunfire while shielding him with his body. On the mission's second day, he ran and then crawled 40 to 50 meters outside his company's area to save one of the Montagnard fighters, dragging the wounded soldier back to the company with one hand, firing his weapon with the other. On his way back to his company, a rocket-propelled grenade landed near Rose, sending shrapnel through Rose's back, leg, and foot. Rose ignored his own wounds and, using a stick as a crutch, focused instead on the other wounded fighter as they made their way back to the rest of the company. When a medevac helicopter was called, Rose stood fully exposed to enemy fire as he tried to pass the wounded up to the helicopter crew overhead. But the incoming gunfire was so heavy that the medevac pilot aborted the mission. The helicopter was so damaged it crashed a few miles away. On the mission's final night, Rose dug trenches for the wounded so he could tend to their injuries, continuing to expose himself to gunfire as he moved from soldier to soldier. As night turned into day, the personnel were told to move to an extraction point where they would be met by helicopter, despite the fact that the North Vietnamese Army was closing in fast. Rose was the last to board, but the aircraft soon took on fire and a Marine door gunner was shot through the neck. The helicopter crashed only kilometers from the original extraction point. Thrown from the helicopter, Rose crawled back toward the wreckage to pull out the wounded and unconscious, fearing the aircraft, smoking and leaking fuel, could explode. He continued treating the injured until another helicopter arrived at the scene of the crash. Scores of men in the company were wounded over those 4 days, but only 3 died, with Rose alone credited with treating as many as 70 wounded fighters. Upon his return to base, Rose refused treatment until all the other men in the company were seen to first. All 16 Americans had been injured, but returned home alive. Now 70, and a father of 3, Rose lives in Huntsville, Alabama, and works with the Knights of Columbus, the American Legion, and local soup kitchens. He spent more than 20 years in the Army before retiring in May of '87 as a captain. Honoring Gary Rose for his heroic deeds is certainly, in President Lincoln's words, altogether fitting and proper, as long as we don't call him a hero. Thank you.
Good job, Larry. That reminds me that, and I put it on the markings down the bulletin here, that it's hard to believe 50 years ago today, there were approximately 500,000 troops in Vietnam. Just when I think back, because my father was in Vietnam, and it doesn't seem that long ago, but 500,000 troops were serving in Vietnam in 1967. Now it's my honor to introduce our keynote speaker. He's chairman of the military affairs of the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce. He was 28 years of service in the United States Army, Army Corps of Engineers, achieved the rank of colonel. He served in 5 combat deployments, and he finished his tour at Southcom here in South Florida. I welcome Colonel Stephen C. Williamson.
So good morning. First thing I want to say is thank you. Thank you, Mike, for helping set this up. Thank you, Victor, wherever you are. There you are, Victor, for now that you're no longer present, you're sitting in the 4th row, I noticed that. But thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it. I'd like to recognize the mayor. I'd like to recognize Father. But most importantly, Merle, I was very impressed with your voice. I tried to keep up with you, but I just couldn't. Thank you very much. But even more importantly, how about these cadets from Mass? Let's give them all a big round of applause. So how many of you all remember these things? You remember these? Okay, so back in the 60s, they were kind of fashionable. Maybe the 70s. But in the 80s and 90s, remember what we called them? BCDs? You got any little BCDs there? All right, I'll talk to you about them afterwards. But nobody would wear them. I think you know what they are. But they're back in fashion. But if I have to go to them, that means I can't read. So hopefully I can stick without those today as we continue through this speech. But it's my pleasure to be here today. I want to welcome you to today's Veterans Day ceremony at the Village Green of Key Biscayne. And this is what a beautiful location this is. Even though we've got construction going around here, you can just tell this is a great, great location. So today and tomorrow, across this great nation and throughout the world, there will be gatherings like this, both small and large, where we will all pause to honor our brave fighting men and women who have for over 230 years underwritten our freedom with their duty, their honor, and their selfless service. We are a special nation, a grateful nation, a fortunate nation. I am honored to be speaking here today on such an important occasion. We are here to recognize our service members and to remember the sacrifices that they have made and the courage that it takes to defend our values, our freedom, and our country. This day, and bear with me because I'm going to follow along with some historical comments here, which began as Armistice Day, was originally set as a legal holiday at the end of World War I. November 11th, 1918. It seems like a long time ago, but if you add it up, that's only 120 years. They can admit a number of wars that we've had since then. The legislation that passed in 1938, November 11th, was then, quote, dedicated to the cause of world peace and to be hereafter celebrated and known as Armistice Day, unquote. This new legal holiday only honored World War I veterans. But in 1954, after World War II and the Korean War, the 83rd Congress of the United States, at the urging of many veteran service organizations, amended the Act of 1938 by striking out the word armistice and, of course, inserting the word veterans. With the approval of this legislation, November 11th became a day to honor Americans and veterans of all wars. A day to honor those who have served and who now serve in uniform, as well as those who died in service to this great country. In 1777, in his essay entitled The American Crisis, Thomas Paine wrote, "Those who expect to reap the blessings of freedom must undergo the fatigue of supporting it." Many of you here today have borne the burden and experienced the fatigue of waging war in order to bring about this peace. To you, we all say thank you. Thank you for setting the example that inspired me and many of my peers to raise our hands for voluntary service to this great nation. That shared service joins us together like no other bond. The camaraderie we share in military service helps define us. I can honestly say that the time I spent as a member of the United States Army is the best, or was the best, of my life. Even after I left the Army, it will stay with me and define me forever. That's why Victor got me to wear this uniform. Doesn't happen often, Victor. So, I've always thought that Veterans Day kind of got the short end of the stick holiday-wise. For many Americans, there is no official day off from work. I mean, many of you are here today without an official day off from work, and we really appreciate that. As there is, of course, for Independence Day. And, of course, many people view Memorial Day as the official day to pay tribute to the service members who have given their lives in service to our country. And yet this day, Veterans Day, serves a very, very important purpose. It is a day we recognize not just those who have given their lives in war, but those who have worn the uniforms of service. They, above all, is an example to celebrate the choice, and I emphasize the choice, one makes to serve their country. For some, it meant the worldwide conflict of World War II, a lifetime of peacekeeping missions, or the tense standoff of the Cold War. For others, the jungles of Vietnam, or in Korea, Panama, and the other conflicts in which we have asked our service members to serve over the year. And of course, we cannot forget that today, for many, service still means multiple tours to the Middle East and Afghanistan, on active duty, or as reservists, or as National Guardsmen, who sacrifice twice when they give up their civilian jobs in order to serve their country. Today, roughly 1% of our population serves in the military. As we consider the impact of those individuals have had on the world, defending freedom and protecting democracy, we can't help think about the words of Winston Churchill. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. So today, to honor that debt, I would ask you to take some time to honor service members, past and present, in at least one of several ways. First, volunteer to help a veteran or service member, regardless of whether you are a veteran or not. We have many transitioning veterans and wounded veterans in our nation who need compassion and your support. Find a way to help them, whether through Veterans affairs organizations or state and local outreach agencies. And given that we as a nation are still at war today, there are many families in our communities all over the country who could also use a helping hand. For many of those who are on deployment right now, knowing their families are receiving support while they're serving overseas can bring reassurance and peace of mind. There are dozens and dozens of ways you can show your support for those serving or those who have served our nation. Second, make an effort to promote military service to our youth. In a time of war, volunteers for service are not hard to find. But I think promoting military service goes much beyond that. We need to do a better job of letting our younger generation know that the military is a viable and valuable career option with unlimited opportunities. And then finally, if you are a veteran, please share your story with others. Let everyone know what you have done so that they too can see the many faces of military service and appreciate the personal sacrifice of their neighbors. If you are not a veteran, please find someone in your life who is and ask them about their service. The more we talk about what we do and what we have done and the impact military service has had on our lives, the better able we are to hold up as an example of excellence. And speaking of excellence, and this is where I'm going to take a turn in my talk. As much as we recognize the service of our veterans during wartime, I think sometimes we forget to recognize how veterans serve after serving our nation. These men and women, after giving it all in uniform, return to their communities and continue to serve. They serve as parents raising children. They serve as stellar employees and bosses. They start and run small businesses. They join and lead civic groups. They support their schools. They serve in political office. And the list goes on. In a humble phrase, they continue to serve after serving. We must recognize and celebrate all that they have given to our great nation in and out of uniform. We all know the stories of the great men like Dwight Eisenhower, and George Marshall. After many years of military service in both World War I and World War II, Eisenhower and Marshall continued to give their all to this country and the world. After World War II, Eisenhower became the president of Columbia University, and then, of course, the president of the United States. Marshall became Secretary of State and gave Europe the Marshall Plan. Soon after, he became the president of the American Red Cross. And then once again, he was called back to be Secretary of Defense. Remarkable service by two very, very remarkable men. Not all of us are as grand as these two men, but all are equally important to the lives and people that they have impacted. I want to talk about two in particular today. Two I believe that each of you know very dearly. Two stories that can be told over and over again across this great nation. Dick Cromartie, who of course this post is named after. He served heroically in the Pacific Theater during World War II. Yet he came home a young man with many great years ahead of him. He entered into law school and married his lovely wife, Emma. After earning his Juris Doctor degree, Dick joined Crown Zellerbach Paper Company, who then transferred this young man and his wife to Chicago to open a new regional office. While in the Chicago area, Dick and Emma started a newspaper called the Lincolnshire News. and then led a successful effort to incorporate the village of Lincolnshire. I think that just kind of started a process where he came later. But anyway, while there, Dick founded the Lincolnshire Swim Club and the Adlai Stevenson High School. Think of the lives he impacted as he continued to serve. Even in retirement, when Dick and Emma made Key Biscayne their home, Dick continued to serve. He helped lead the effort to incorporate the village of Key Biscayne in 1991. And then in 1996, Dick formed the American Legion Key Biscayne Post 374 and was named its first commander. Dick was a life member of the Marine Reserve Officers Association. He served on the board of the Army-Navy Club of Coral Gables and was the president of the Rotary International Club of Key Biscayne. He was a longtime member of Key Biscayne Yacht Club, and he left this world 2 very proud daughters and many grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Again, think of the lives he impacted as he continued to serve. How about Mort Freed, who also served valiantly in the Pacific Theater during World War II? After the war, Mort returned to the University of Miami, earning first his business degree and then his law degree. He built a career as a lawyer and raised a wonderful family with the love of his life, Joy. Like Dick, Mort got involved in the village incorporation movement, which I think is where these guys got together and started conspiring, which ultimately gave Key Biscayne its independence from Miami-Dade County. From there, he became an elected member of the First Village Council, ultimately serving for 11 years. Mort volunteered for the Chamber of Commerce, 4th of July Parade Committee, Lions Club, Key Biscayne Music and Drama Club, and as a Little League coach. He served as Yacht Commodore, and as you know, joined the American Legion Post 374. Many, many things that he did for this community. Once again, I ask you, think of the lives that he impacted as he continued to serve after serving. So we all follow in the footsteps of generations of fine Americans like Dick and Mort, who continued to serve after serving. We have many examples of courage, service, and sacrifice to reflect on today. Let's use this opportunity now and on Veterans Days for the years to come to celebrate service to our nation and to demonstrate the appreciation we have for our military, and to inspire future generations to dedicate themselves in the name of the many who have come before them. As Thomas Jefferson said, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. Today we give thanks to live in a country where citizens from every generation have willingly and courageously raised their hand to stand the watch. For all those veterans here today, thank you for your service and your sacrifice. I share the pride you feel in being able to count yourself among the 1%, the greatest military in the world. For those of you who are not veterans, thank you for choosing to share this special day with us and to show your support of our veterans, both past and present. May God bless you, our service members, and our veterans, and may God bless the United States of America.
Token of appreciation, we're presenting you with our challenge coin from the Richard Party Post 374. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. We thank Colonel Williamson for his continued service. Another individual, Mr. Johnson, Charles Johnson. He is the U.S.Army Reserve Ambassador. Another long, distinguished career, 28 years of service. He was a retired as Lieutenant Colonel of the JAG Corps. He's a local attorney, and once again, he continues to serve. Charles Johnson, please come forward.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very glad to be back here again. I would first like to thank the Richard L. Cromartie American Legion Post 374 for inviting me to speak again in this annual event for Veterans Day. I was here last year. As I did last... All right, I'll get closer. How's that? As I did last year, I bring you greetings from the car. That's the Chief of Army Reserves, Lieutenant General Charles Luckey. I'm one of about 70 Army Reserve ambassadors throughout the country, 3 of whom are in Florida. Our mission is to serve as a link between the Army Reserve and the civilian sector, including seeking support from elected officials and forging relationships between Army Reserve units and the local population to improve the understanding and appreciation for the Army Reserve. Since we are about 100 years from the end of World War I would like to start by briefly providing a history of the origin of the Army Reserve that begins as a federal force during the time of World War I. Congress first created a Federal Reserve Force in 1908, the Medical Reserve Corps, to remedy mobilization and preparedness challenges experienced in the nation's wars of the 1800s. At that time, no reserve force existed under direct command or control of the federal government. Led by former President Theodore Roosevelt, the preparedness movement set the stage for the National Defense Act of 1916, which created the Officers Reserve Corps and the Enlisted Reserve Corps, the predecessors to today's current Army Reserve. Once war was declared, the Officer Reserve Corps grew dramatically, providing more than 89,000 officers, 1/3 of whom were medical doctors. This quickly quadrupled the Army's capacity to care for the sick and wounded. Within the Enlisted Reserve Corps, 15,000 soldiers were served in the medical department, and more than 80,000 Enlisted Reserve Corps or regular Army Reserve soldiers served during World War I. Here's a quote you've heard before. On the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918, the guns of both the victors and the vanquished fell silent, and the war to end all wars slipped into history. For the next 20 years, Armistice Day was observed to honor and remember the more than 100,000 Americans who perished, freeing the world from tyranny. Today we celebrate Veterans Day, a day that honors not just the heroes of World War I, but the tens of millions of men and women who have served our nation in times of war and times of peace. Those who died, those who never returned, and those we are blessed to still have with us. Their service and sacrifice, from the gas-filled trenches of World War I to mountains of Afghanistan and the deserts of Iraq, chronicle much of the history of the century just past and the one now begun. Yet, while the technology of war has changed considerably over the intervening years, America's most valuable military asset has remained the same. I bet you can guess what I'm going to say. The character and courage of our men and women in uniform. As President Ronald Reagan said at the dedication of the Vietnam Memorial on November 11, 1988, our liberties, our values, all for which American stands, is safe today because brave men and women have been ready to face the fire at freedom's front. Today our nation is entering another period of consequence, in many ways as great as any we have faced before. A new threat paradigm challenges U.S. military dominance across every domain, with peer and near-peer adversaries who are not only capable of contesting American power, but outmatching it in certain capability areas. We must meet the threats of this new strategic environment with forces that are ready to respond to the challenges of today and win decisively on the battlefields of tomorrow. To that end, America's Army Reserve is moving to a new model of operational readiness that will build and sustain the most capable, combat-ready, and lethal Federal Reserve Force in the history of the nation. And readiness is the key. In an environment of high-end lethality and battle space complexity, rapid mobilization of lead formations is critical to deploying and sustaining combat power, which means that the old system of deploying units on a predictable and rotational basis will no longer suffice. In its place, the Army Reserve is developing a force ready to deploy in 0 to 90 days, and trained and equipped to fight, survive, and win against current and emerging threats. What we call Ready Force X is comprised of two groups. A fight-fast force of units trained, equipped, and ready to deploy in 30 days or less, and an operational depth force of units based on current war plans that are trained, equipped, and ready to deploy in 30 to 60 and 60 to 90 days. The remaining strategic depth force will consist of those operational forces units needed beyond 120 days. Clearly, quickly generating and deploying this force will require additional training days, the most capable on modern equipment, and command and control systems that are completely interoperable with the total Army and the Joint Force. But we are well on our way to making all of these goals a reality. In 1918, the new National Army, forerunner of the Army Reserve, was created from volunteers and conscripts drafted under the new Selective Service Act of 1917. More than 80,000 Army Reserve soldiers were placed into newly organized units and deployed to war zones around the world, where they served in every division of the American Expeditionary Force, or AEF. And in the final months of the war, these soldiers helped tip the balance in favor of the Allies in decisive battles such as in Marne, St. Mel, and Moines-Argonne. I think I messed those names up. Anyway, today, America's Army Reserve continues to support the operational Army and the Joint Force in more than 30 countries and 20 time zones across the globe, providing the capabilities and agility the Army needs to prevail on the battlefields of today and tomorrow. And like the National Army of old, we continue to adapt and learn the critical nature of combat arms on the modern battlefield. Yet, while a century has passed since the United States entered the Great War, the importance of Army Reserve families, communities, and employers has not diminished. We honor and remember not only the soldiers who fought, but the families and communities who played no small role in the victory that was achieved for the nation and the world on that day in November so long ago. To all of them, we owe a debt we can never repay. So on this Veterans Day, let us honor and remember all who served our nation. It is a privilege to be with you all today and to have this opportunity to thank both the millions of soldiers who have and continue to serve and the many millions of Americans who make our service possible. May God bless you, the Army, and our great nation. Happy Veterans Day.
They're very valuable, so we don't want to give them out willy-nilly. Thank you for your continued service, Mr. Johnson. And speaking of service, it's my pleasure to welcome our great mayor, Myra Lindsay.
Good morning. First, please join me in thanking our members of the Richard L. Cromartie American Legion Post 374 for starting this wonderful tradition of Veterans Day, and also our Mast Academy, ROTC, who woke up this morning to give tremendous support. Thank you all.
Yeah.
It is truly an honor and a privilege to be invited to speak here today. As your mayor, I am deeply honored to stand here and have the opportunity to reflect upon the sacrifices that you and close to 24 million of our nation's veterans have made for our country. You are the brave men and women who served to protect the United States. You are parents, children, brothers, sisters, and grandparents. You are friends, neighbors, and co-workers. You are the cornerstone of our community here in the village of Key Biscayne. And so I stand here today simply as a grateful American. I represent the grateful Americans who do not have the honor of speaking to their heroes on Veterans Day. I represent grateful Americans who wish that they could reach out and thank each and every one of you personally. I stand here before you on behalf of our village, your neighbors, your friends, and your community in gratitude. John F. Kennedy said, as we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them. So it isn't enough to just say it. We need to be it, grateful, appreciative, and thankful. Our Veterans Day ceremony is very important to this community. It is an opportunity to convene, to share, and to teach lessons about honor, character, and sacrifice. And we've heard of all those today, and they are truly inspiring and moving, and we thank you. But as your neighbors and friends, our gratitude extends beyond today. We live in gratitude for your service every day. And we honor you and all the men and women who have served our country most by living well as a grateful nation. Thank you all for your sacrifices and your service. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. What great words. And it really is true. It's the purpose of remembering. It's important to remember. It's important to hear these stories. And it's important to keep passing them down the line. Where's Matthew? I know we try to impart still important things on him. Matthew keeps wanting to sign him up for the Marine Corps, but he's only 12. As we close the ceremony, please join with Merle in singing God Bless America, followed by Father giving the closing blessing.
While the storm clouds gather far across the sea, let us vote allegiance to the land that's free. Let us all be grateful for the land so fair, as we raise our voices in a solemn prayer. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her to the night with the light from above. From mountains to the prairies, to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, home, sweet home.
God of compassion and dignity and of strength, watch over these veterans of the United States. Bless them with wholeness and love. Shelter them. Heal their wounds. Comfort their hearts. Grant them peace. God of justice and truth, bless our veterans. These men and women of courage and valor, with the deep and abiding understanding of our profound gratitude, protect them and their families from loneliness and want. Grant them lives of joy and bounty. For their dedication and honor, be remembered as a blessing from generation to generation. We ask this in your great name. Amen. God bless.
Thank you, Father Juan Carlos, and thank you for the Veterans Day Mass on Wednesday. Everybody that attended said it was one of the most amazing that they've been to, and every year it's just wonderful. So thank you for that. Please remain standing for the retirement of the colors. Retrieve the colors! Forward, march, right. That concludes our ceremony today. We want to thank our police and fire department, especially our color guard. Thank you, color guard.
What so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars